Miata is always the answer, or at least that's what the name would tell you if you break it down as an acronym, but the answer to so many people's prayers nowadays is the G80 BMW M3, or its coupe, wagon, or convertible variant. See, I was scrolling Facebook the other day and TJ Lamb, the Magna Cars guy, made a post that poses the question, is uniqueness disappearing in the car community? I went to a car meet the other day and out of 100 cars, 40 were probably BMWs. I love BMWs. In fact, I want a G80 M4 myself. This had to have been a typo. He doesn't strike me as someone who doesn't know what he's talking about. Probably meant a G83 M4. However, I can't help but wonder, where are the unique cars? Well, I think you just answered your own question with the first part of your sentence.
Hi guys, I'm Shmi and you're watching Vinstagram.
And the funniest part is how later in the same post, he then says, if you have money to spend on a car build, maybe consider something other than a fresh off the showroom car. Just my thoughts. Right after he says he wants an M4 himself. You can't make this up. And honestly, I can't even be mad at him. The fact of the matter is, the G80 M3 is just good. There's no way around it. It's such an attractive proposition at its price point because it is simply better than the opposition. And I know there's still a lot of haters out there who still can't stand the grill. Fucking get over yourself. Honestly, I used to be one of you too, but look at me now, living in the real world. The G80 M3 is just good. The sooner you can bring yourself to that realization, the sooner you can understand why things are the way they are. I think this is partially due to the fact that the economy has pushed everyone into wanting a do-everything performance sedan that's nice, but also fast, sounds decent, and is extremely tunable, even if at the expense of a little tactility and a little weight gain. Nobody has the finances to just casually be able to afford a second or third car anymore. I remember back in the 2000s, your rich friend's dad would have a fairly lame but decently nice daily driver, and then a cool, less than practical sports car. But nowadays, even the upper middle class and lower upper class are being squeezed. You don't see as many cars parked in driveways, and auto manufacturers' lineups are reflecting this. Big luxury GT coupes like the S-Class Coupe, 8 Series, and Lexus LC were barely feasible even when they were for sale. And smaller, less practical coupes like the 1 and 2 Series have always been too niche, which is why the latest 2 Series is significantly bigger than the 1 Series it evolved from. And Mercedes and Audi never really tried to compete with the 1 and 2 Series with the A3 and the CLA or A-Class. In fact, the 1 Series had to become a hatchback to compete with them, and the 2 Series had to grow to the point that it was the size of an older 3 Series. So to maintain that same level of luxury, performance, and versatility as having multiple cars in the 2000s and 2010s, sub $100,000 performance cars need to become that do-all, be-all car. And I know what you're about to say. Well, people are buying second cars so that they don't put miles on their M3. Yeah, it's gotten to the point where people are buying a beater so that they don't have to daily drive their daily driver. I'm talking about multiple cars for multiple purposes, not a beater that doesn't actually offer more practicality or utility, not a car that you need because you can't afford damages and depreciation on your M3 that's very daily drivable. When I say people aren't buying multiple cars like they used to, I'm saying people aren't buying multiple cars simply because they want to, for pleasure, for leisure. But for the most part, these cars are being driven very often, very hard, and being used for pretty much everything, like they're supposed to. The reason a guy like me who is very familiar with the past 4 generations of M3 isn't satisfied with how the latest generation drives is because it loses some of that tactility, some of that emotion in order to offer more versatility, more comfort, while also being even faster. Some of the characteristics that attract former Audi customers, former AMG customers, are features that BMW M3 guys don't really care for. In fact, of the guys who I know who own G80s and can also afford an actual second car that they bought for leisure, like solely just to have because they wanted it, they also own an older M car. See, that's the thing. A G80 is a tuner's playground, so it appeals to the tuner scene, but it has 4 seats, can be had as a coupe, convertible, wagon, or sedan, with ample trunk space and even more legroom than any generation of M3 prior, while also getting optional all-wheel drive for the first time ever, so Audi guys can't even take them from a dig anymore. People complained about the F80 interior. The G80 interior is one of the nicest interiors in its category without sacrificing the functionality of the F80 interior. And having driven one in the past and having spent countless hours on road trips in that car, it is very usable and very comfortable when you just pop it into comfort mode and cruise. And even though it has a less tactile driving experience than the previous generation, when you put that thing in the M mode and throw it at some corners, it is an objectively better performer. So what is there not to like about this car? The grille, still? Give me a break. At this point, I think there are 2 types of car guys out there. People that like the G80 M3 and liars. In reality, TJ clearly isn't trying to say BMWs with this post. Even he understands they're just good at everything. I think the root of this problem that is the lack of variety, the lack of uniqueness within the car scene, is that unlike the F80, the G80 didn't really have any competitors. Back then, the M3 was still considered the benchmark in the smallish sports sedan category, but the competition was far more stiff. You had the Giulia Quadrifoglio that came with a worse transmission but more horsepower than a non-comp G80 M3, and what some would argue is a spicier personality with better aesthetics. The C63 M3, even with two turbos, carried a V8 engine into the latest generation at the time, and had what some would argue is a nicer interior, but 10 years down the line, I think I would beg to differ when it comes to build quality. The RS5 was, in my experience, rather clinical and not very fun compared to the F80, but it had an interior whose quality stood the test of time a little better, a little more horsepower, and quattro to put the power down much easier. So back then, Audi guys were not letting M3 guys forget that they were getting gapped from the light. You even had the Cadillac ATS-V, which wasn't nearly as competent of an M3 fighter as the CT4V Blackwing is today, and the Jaguar XE Project 8 was too late, too rare, and honestly too expensive for this conversation. But it certainly was cooler than everything I just mentioned, including the M3, even in its F82 M4 GTS form. Nowadays, it just seems like none of the competitors have shown up for the G80 like they did the F80, and it just goes to show that the M3 is the standard for this kind of vehicle. Now, the CT4V Blackwing honestly is Cadillac's best foray into a small performance sedan ever. Some of my cohorts, including Cars with Miles, would claim that it's even better in certain ways, but look at everything else. Core alpha glazers are so delusional that they think that the same Giulia Quadrifoglio that was released 11 years ago to fight the F80 is a competent alternative, and that's their prerogative in the same way that I'd rather an E92 M3 over a G80 M3, but the market says otherwise. Mercedes might have a car that's a better performer from factory on paper, but nobody wants to spend more money than a G80 M3 on a C63 that's hybrid and a 4-cylinder. And the RS5 is borderline irrelevant for the same reasons as the Giulia Quadrifoglio. Sure, it had an update in its RS5 Performance Edition, but that's way too little, way too late. And the latest one is supposed to fight the next generation of M3. Because there's no way they think they're trying to fight the G80 with that thing when it weighs 5,200 pounds. Be for real. Again, the current RS5, or I guess the previous gen RS5 now, it was an F80 competitor that was given some suspension updates and a little more power. Hell, the M5 is going even more uncontested without an E-Class AMG or a new RS7 and Panamera models that offer similar performance, even though I would argue some of them are nicer, better vehicles, are far more expensive, so they better be. I am a Porsche salesman, by the way, so if you want to buy a Panamera or any other kind of Porsche, definitely hit me up on Instagram or go to the link in the description to my contact page on my website. All there really is left is the CT5V Blackwing, which you really have to give Cadillac props for picking up the slack for this generation of super saloons. They really came to compete this time with an incredible interior, a manual transmission, and the best sounding soundtrack of any super saloon of the past 5 years. I would actually take this over an M5 all day, but realistically, a Corvette engine from 10 years ago is not keeping up with what the G90 M5 is putting down right now. I honestly don't know why they didn't more heavily invest in their Blackwing Hot V twin turbo V8. With that, they could have had a next gen CT5V Blackwing, a next gen Escalade, a supercar based on the Corvette with the Blackwing engine. Let me stop before I get way off track, because in the 2000s and 2010s, you had the W212 and W213 E63, the CTS-V, the RS7, the XFRS, the GSF. Might as well throw the Hellcat in there too, because it's not like people weren't cross-shopping them with the M5. It's not like journalists weren't making comparison videos for that sole purpose. There was more competition for the F80 M3 and F10 M5 back then, and there was simply more variety within the sub $100,000 enthusiast market. Hellcats don't exist anymore. Corvettes aren't the same. A Z06 isn't even a sub $100,000 car anymore. Camaros don't really exist anymore. Jag isn't really doing anything interesting at the moment. The Lexus F Sport lineup is borderline non-existent. The G80 M3, even with its flaws, is genuinely a hard car to justify anything else against right now. It's an insane straight line car with over 500 horsepower from factory. It's a beast in the corners, even with the added weight. X-Drive makes it more usable and makes the appeal of Audis less appealing, while a nicer interior and a decently smooth ride, all things considered, also removes the appeal of AMGs. Unparalleled versatility, being the jack of all trades, seems to be the name of the game right now. A front mid-engine 600 horsepower 2-seater sports car is a hard vehicle to sell for under $100,000, and therefore a hard vehicle for a lot of people to justify owning alongside their daily at above $100,000. A 700 horsepower rear-wheel drive supercharged V8 coupe, even with a bad interior and no investment in chassis dynamics whatsoever. Come on, it's 2026. Be realistic. A mid-engine, lightweight, bare-bones sports car running on an engine that they source from Toyota isn't even possible for under $100,000 anymore. And lower-end manufacturers can't seem to develop a new, low-horsepower yet lightweight and manual transmission sports car under current regulations unless it's based off a BRZ or a Corolla. The affordable sports car market has been all but eviscerated, unless you want one of those or you want to pay $40,000 for an EcoBoost Mustang. And can you believe that? An EcoBoost Mustang being $40,000? I swear, a Terminator Cobra was like $35,000 $45,000 brand new. That was the top of the line badass muscle car of its time. It was the Hellcat of the 2000s. They said it made 390 horsepower and it was dynoing well into the mid 400s. It was making more horsepower than the E90 M3 that came out 4 years after it ended production. You couldn't even get a 4-cylinder Mustang back then, and now they cost more than a Terminator Cobra? Obviously inflation is a thing, I'm not denying that. A few videos ago, I just made the point that in today's money, a Skyline GTR that was out at the same time as a new Edge Mustang would have costed more than an M4 comp these days. But just ignore logic with me real quick, just a little bit, for dramatic effect, because the difference between the car market now and then is that dramatic. I'm not saying sports cars suck now, well, kinda. But what I'm actually saying is that there is good reason why everyone wants the G80, and it's not because people don't value individuality. Because if you look at all these different ways people modify these cars for all different kinds of purposes, that can't be true. It's not entirely because everybody's just hopping on the bandwagon either. It's just because people desire various things in their enthusiast cars, and a lot of the cars that would give you those things that you desired in a major way have disappeared, and the G80 M3 is currently doing all of that and some. Obviously, a jack of all trades is a master of none, but I'll be damned if it isn't a master of taking boost. I'll be damned if it isn't a master of gapping most things on the road from a dig. I'll be damned if it isn't a master of taking corners in the mountains, then also being a nice, comfortable environment for your passenger princess at the same time. Because even if it isn't the best at fulfilling your desires, you still see a lot of guys who used to like GTRs going into G80s because they offer a newer platform with greater potential that hasn't been tapped yet. You see a lot of muscle car guys getting into them because they don't make muscle and or pony cars anymore, and they have nicer interiors and still have insane straight line speed. Like, I know at least 2 Camaro owners personally who are defaulting to a G80 as soon as they can. A lot of RS5 and Giulia guys get it because it's nicer, still performs better, but comes with all the modern conveniences you would expect of a car that was designed for this decade. C63 guys want it because their car successor is now a 4-cylinder hybrid, and F80 guys can get into G80s and still have a very familiar yet objectively better car and not have to hear all that shit talking from their Audi and Alpha owning friends because they all own G80s now as well. The G8X M3 and M4 are so popular because they just offer something for everybody. So no, I don't think this is entirely everyone just riding the wave. I think the wave was generated because everyone saw something different yet desirable to them and everybody moved at once.